This woman found a severed head in her 19-year-old son's closet. This case is unbelievable, and the interrogation clips that come with it that we'll be going through, crazy. Hi, I'm Meg. I talk about true crime. Let's get into this case.
And how did you get here?
I murdered someone.
Okay.
So today we're talking about Brian Cohey. I think that's how you say his last name. This is a very recent case. Brian was born on the 10th of January 2002. He grew up in Colorado with his mom, dad, and brother. Brian was diagnosed with ADHD and autism quite early on in his childhood, and as early as middle school, he started displaying antisocial behavior. One thing about Brian that never changed is that he absolutely loved to get a reaction out of someone, and he would say whatever it took to get a reaction. As a result of that, he was often getting into altercations at school. Brian was apparently considered to be an outcast, but apparently the students didn't really feel safe around him. He just got worse and worse as he got older and the jokes became concerning. They'd get progressively more disturbing and offensive. In 2018, he was actually arrested for assaulting another student with a homemade mace, which is like a weapon. He would also be suspended twice in 2019. One for inducing a panic attack in a student with PTSD. He did this on purpose. And another one was just for making inappropriate sexual comments to other students. So safe to say, people weren't a huge fan of Brian. He eventually moved schools, and there he did have a small group of friends. One of the friends said that their group was a group of outcasted people, and they all just chose to accept each other. Now, most teenagers have an idol, right? Someone in the public eye that they look up to. Do you know who Brian's idol was? None other than Jeffrey Dahmer. He was obsessed with everything disturbing, but not in a curious way, oh my god, that's insane kind of way. It was oh, I want to do that kind of way. He really wanted to know what it would feel like to kill someone. Teachers even found one of his notebooks, which just had a bunch of notes about different serial killers and a bunch of information about them, almost like he was studying for something. After graduating high school, Brian got a job in a grocery store, but clearly his head was still in the same place because at this time he was Googling homicidal ideations, stuff like that. His parents also found what you call a kill kit in his room, which had hammers and duct tape, I think, and shovels, everything you'd need. And they were like, Brian, get rid of this. It was a little bit concerning for the parents, but they didn't think he would actually do it. So they told him, if we find something like this again, we'll be calling the police, but get rid of it now. It was an ultimatum. We'll talk about that more later because they talk about it in the interviews with Brian. Jump to February 2021 when Brian was 19. Police get a call from Brian's parents to a boat ramp where Brian had accidentally driven his car into the Colorado River. When police asked Brian what happened, it seemed really innocent. He was just he was parked out there, and when he went to drive off, he lost control of the car and it backed up into the river. It really seemed like nothing. It was just a freak accident. They thought it was weird. They thought he was a little weird, but they were well, it's just a kid. When the truck came to tow the car out of the water, they noticed that there was red coming off the back of it. And so they called Brian's parents and they were like, is he injured? Was he bleeding at all? And they asked Brian and he was like, no, I don't know what that could be. I'm not bleeding. I have no idea. So it was brushed off. No one thought anything of it. Once again, it seemed innocent. Anyone would think that that was innocent. When the Cohey family got that car back, Brian's dad noticed that there was a man called Warren's wallet in the car. And he said, why have you got this man's wallet, Brian? And Brian said oh, I found it at the boat ramp. I was meaning to return it. But then, that same day, that same man gets reported missing. Warren Barnes was a homeless man who the community loved. He loved reading, so he was often seen around reading. Everyone knew him. He was friendly, well-known, loved. But then he just doesn't show up for work, which was really abnormal. He never was late. He never didn't show up, so immediately a missing persons report was filed. Warren was never known to go to that boat ramp. It was like an hour and a half, 2-hour walk from where he usually hung around. So it was very bizarre that it was found there. And Brian's dad, when he went to return the wallet, he called Warren's workplace, and that's when he found out that he was missing. And he had a bad feeling about it. In fact, both of Brian's parents thought something was off. So one day when Brian was out the house seeing a friend, his mom decided to go through his room. What Brian's mom found in his room was the stuff of nightmares. She opens up Brian's closet and finds a severed head and hands. She didn't know they were hands. She wasn't sure what they were, but it was hands. It was hands in a plastic bag and a head. A head. She immediately calls her husband, gets him home, and together they call Brian. They didn't make it seem like they knew anything, because they didn't want him to run off. And their plan was basically get Brian home before the police arrive, or else if he gets there and he sees the police is there, he might take off. So once Brian pulled up in the driveway, the police were called. I have no idea what Brian's mom was like expecting to find in his room that day or what she was looking for, but I can guarantee you it wasn't that. Apparently when the police got there, Brian was still in the driveway, and he just like openly admitted to it. He was like, oh yeah, my mom found a head in my room. Police are like, pardon? The strangest part of this entire case is the interrogation videos with Brian. Brian had the right to remain silent, but he did not have the ability because it was a tell-all. He was not sparing any details. I literally was watching this interview. It's like an hour and something. Luckily, I have the highlights for you, but I was literally watching it like this. What? Huh? It's very clear from these interview clips that he is proud of what he did. In all of the true crime videos I've done and all of the interviews that I've watched, this one is hands down the craziest. Like, he goes into such detail. He gets on the ground and literally shows police what he was doing to this man. And like, he shows not an ounce of remorse. The things talked about in these clips, like, they're brutal. They're graphic, they're gruesome. He's so nonchalant about it as well. It's terrifying. And so I don't know how much this app is going to like them, so I am going to cover that in a separate video, but I will be posting it directly after this one. You won't have to wait or anything. So that night, Brian had found Warren sleeping under a bridge where he attacked him. This suspect was not premeditated, but the murder was. He wore 3 pairs of gloves, and yeah, he found him under the bridge, sleeping, and he attacked him. I'll go more into detail in the next video about those specifics. You can hear him talk about it himself, but he did actually dump his body in that river, which is why his car had blood on it. He did genuinely accidentally drive into the river, but that's why he was there. The more he talked in these interviews, the more disturbing the details got. Warren was greatly missed and mourned by the community. They created this memorial piece for him, which I thought was so sweet. It's just so sad because he was asleep when it happened. He was defenseless. Like, it's awful. Another insane detail is that Brian's friends were interviewed, and they weren't really shocked that he had done this, but they were shocked that he only did it to one person. They thought if he ever actually acted on wanting to do it, he would have done it on a larger scale. At the age of 21, Brian was sentenced to life in prison without parole, with an additional 13 years for tampering with evidence. That is all I can fit in these 10 minutes, but make sure you go to part 2 because you don't want to miss those interviews. I'll see you there.